Thanks for coming tonight. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the difference between morality and government and why we need to know those things, why those things are important to us. First of all, what is morality? What is freedom? What is liberty? Why do we care about those things? Why do they matter in our lives? Why do we need them? And if we have all of those things, why do we need government? What is government? What's the proper role of government? What's the proper role of people in government? In 1997, there was a survey by the National Constitution Center, and in that survey, 84% of the people that responded to the survey said that it was very important to them that government work as intended, and for government to work as it was intended to work, people had to be involved. 84% of the people said that. 75% of those people said that Constitution mattered in their everyday lives. Constitution matters in their everyday lives. Now, in that same poll, 41% of the people did not know that there were three branches of government. 62% of the people could not name all three branches. 33% of the people couldn't name any of them. Now, every teenage child knows that www starts a web address, right? Pretty much everybody in the room knows that, right? You type in www, you probably don't even have to do that anymore, but that's how it started. But 71% of teenage children do not know that we, the people of the United States, starts the Constitution. So we know how to put in a web address, but we don't know how our founding document starts. And you know, it's funny, I don't expect people to memorize that document, but you should have a basic idea what's in it. It's kind of funny, when we were flying the airplane, I didn't demand that my students know everything about it, but I figured they ought to know the basics, and then they ought to be able to find out the details if they need to. Once they catch fire, they should know that Volume 1 has the emergency procedures, and Volume 2 has the supplemental procedures, and so on. And they should know basically that Chapter 8 is fire, and Chapter 9 is explosion, and Chapter 6 is landing gear and something else. So that's what we're talking about with just knowledge, just basic knowledge of our government. And ignorance of the Constitution and ignorance of its principles, they define us in the sense that we don't have the filter through which we can measure the performance of government unless we know the basics of the rules of government. How do you know when a public official is cheating you if you don't know what the rules are that that public official is supposed to live by? How can you hold government accountable when you don't know what to hold them accountable for? And that's the most important part of being a citizen, is the accountability. Now, I think that just in my reading that this started somewhat in the 1960s for most of us, because in the 60s we had a president who had the Great Society programs. And we had grand expectations that government would deliver grand services to all of us. And that's where the concepts of social justice, civil justice, environmental justice, economic justice were born. But none of those things exist in the Constitution. The Constitution addresses liberty. And without liberty, none of the rest of that's possible. All of that's a dream without liberty. So now, let's just go for a moment and ask ourselves, what is morality? And why is morality important? What is morality when we define the difference between freedom and liberty? Morality is the difference, because freedom is an absolute, right? Freedom gives us the power to speed, the power to shoplift, the power to steal. In fact, really, without morality, what's the point? Without morality, why don't you go into 7-Eleven, shoot the guy in the head, and take the quart of milk and walk out the door? I mean, is it because of the law that you don't do that? No, because there are people that do that in spite of the law. It's because you have the morality to know the difference between right and wrong. So when you exercise a freedom, which we are all born with, you exercise that freedom with the morality to know when you should exert your liberty and when it tramples on the liberty that your neighbor enjoys. And because you're a moral people, you don't do the things that you know are wrong. So really, morality is that innate sense of the difference between right and wrong. Are we born with that sense? Yes, I think we are. But when we're babies, we don't exercise that sense, do we? Everything's mine. What's yours is mine. If mine's broken, the thing you have is mine. I want mine first, and you can have yours second if there's enough left over after I have mine. So it is instruction along the way in that morality that causes you to be a moral human being and to choose the path of doing right instead of the path of doing wrong. So what is government then really in its most basic sense? Government is nothing more than power exercised. That's all it is. It's power. It is mindless power, and it's power exercised. Now here's our problem. When we abdicate morality, more government is necessary. When we abdicate morality, when we make the wrong choices intentionally, or when we ignore the right choices, that is when regulatory schemes have to step in. You cannot hold up a department store. If you don't know the difference between right and wrong, there'll be a 20-year jail sentence for a guy like you. But here's the real problem for us. With the loss of morality, more and more government encroaches into our lives. Now, is government really responsible to make sure that we are a moral people? Well, California Government Code section 821 says that no government employee will be liable for either his act or his omission, his failure to act. That's right. Government Code section 521 says no government employee can be held liable for either his act or his omission, his failure to act. How many of you have seen the side of a police car where it says protect and serve? How many of you believe the duty of the police is to protect and serve this community? You're wrong. That's a goal. It's a moral goal that they set for themselves. It's a code of ethics. It's a standard of behavior. But California Government Code, Section 845 and 846 say that no police officer or agency will be held responsible for either failing to protect you or even when they intervene in a situation for not being able to protect you. They cannot be held liable if services are not rendered at all. And there are several Supreme Court cases that back that up. Wilson versus D.C., where there were several young women in a condominium. Some guys kicked the door in. They did some very awful things for several hours to one of these women. The other two were hiding in the attic. They heard the room get quiet. They crept down the stairs to find out what was going on, to see if their friend was alive or dead. The two gentlemen involved in this horrible assault were asleep on the couch. When the two other women came down the stairs and woke them up. Several 911 calls ensued during this 4 to 5 hour process, by the way, while they were being violently assaulted, all three of these women. And those calls, during those calls, they were told the police are on their way, the police are on their way. Well, the police didn't show up until after the crime was committed. And they sued because they believed that since they had made those 911 calls, the government had a responsibility to protect them from violence. I have some bad news, folks. The government doesn't have a responsibility to protect you from crime or violence or anything else for that matter. And further, they cannot be held liable for failing to do so or for doing a lousy job, even though they might want to do so in the worst way. And the Supreme Court upheld that. And those women got nothing. Now, there is one instance when government is duty-bound and legally bound to protect you. And that is if you enjoy a special relationship with government. Do you know what constitutes a special relationship? When you're a prisoner. When you're a prisoner and a peace officer or a public agency has deprived you intentionally, deprived you of your liberty, you now constitute a special class and you have a special relationship with that agency and they are legally obligated to protect you. That's true. But as a citizen, the government has no obligation to protect you. They have no obligation to provide for you. All of that is a falsehood that's been created through what I would call the Great Consensus, where we have been given so much from a government who wants to tell you everything you should do and every breath you take and everything you eat and what you shouldn't eat and what kids could have in their lunches and what they shouldn't have in their lunches and what has too much cholesterol and what doesn't have enough cholesterol. What kind of baby carriage you have, what kind of stroller you push, what kind of car you drive, how thick the seat belts are, the air you breathe. In fact, pretty soon in California, you're going to be taxed for every mile you drive because you, as individual human beings, are killing the environment. And in order to stop that, you have to be taxed. And you're going to be taxed until you stop killing the environment. Now, whose idea is that? Is it yours? It's government's, isn't it? So government is simply and clearly the exercise of power, the unchecked exercise of power, except for one thing. Except for one thing. And this is a very important thing. Except for constitutional republic that defines very clearly the limits and the boundaries that government is allowed to extend themselves toward. And constitutional republic, that's it. In the United States, this is it. This is the rule book. Do you know in this rule book there isn't one single rule that binds the people? Not one. Every rule in this book binds government. So why is it, if all that's true, why are we here? If all the things I said to you are a published fact, what are we doing here right now? Because obviously that's not the way this is working. And why isn't it the way this is working? Because we have abdicated our responsibility to become involved and to hold government accountable for their actions and for the consequences of those actions. This is our fault. Because who is government? I'll tell you in a second here. Government is we, the people of the United States. We are the government. Why do we have government? Why did we create government in the first place? Did government create us or did we create government? That's obviously we created government. This was not a land devoid of everything with a government already in place waiting for people to govern. In fact, there's no place on earth like that. There was only one place on earth like that, the Garden of Eden. And the people made a huge mistake in that one. And we've been paying for that for a very long time, but we deserve it, so I'm not going to get into that one. But that was the only place where government existed before the people. Everywhere else, people came before the government. So why do we form governments? What do we need them for? And this is that principle some of you probably heard me talk about. It's called meeting of the minds. This is a rule of evidence. Whenever a contract is misunderstood or someone violates a contract and everybody's arguing about it, the court orders people to go to a conference called the meeting of the minds. And in the meeting of the minds, there's a rule of evidence called the best evidence. And best evidence is always the oldest document, the original text. The text where people who authored the contract spoke to one another, their notes, their letters, their diaries, their newspaper articles, the Federalist Papers. Well, fortunately for us, both in the United States and in California, we have it all. We have all those documents. We have the notes, letters, speeches, we have diaries, letters they wrote to one another. Heck, we've even been in their bedrooms. We know what their dresser drawers look like. We know everything about these men. So we know what the original intent of the contract was. We know exactly what it was. And we know what it was in no uncertain terms. And Webster's dictionary was penned in the early 1800s, 1828, I believe, and not to preclude people from changing the Constitution, but to sever the ties with England forever by forming a language that was clearly American. And President William Howard Taft, who was also a Supreme Court justice, he said that the Constitution is not a living document, and I can prove it, because it's written in words, and words can be looked up in the dictionary. So unless you change the meaning of a word, the Constitution cannot change. The Constitution cannot change. Why is it changing before our very eyes? It's not. Government is exercising power because we lack the morality to stop them. And they will exercise more and more and more and more until the people make themselves heard in no uncertain terms like the government does. Now we have another document that allowed us to form government, that literally created our situation. That's the Declaration of Independence. That's the pre-founding document, if you will. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth, That's an interesting statement when you're talking about 13 separate colonies, isn't it? So the colonies intended to become equal and separate on the world stage with all other nations. That's what they intended to do, and that is what they did. Now, in that journey to liberty, we discovered some things. And liberty is not a new concept, by the way. It's thousands of years old. Marcus Cicero said there exists a law that isn't written down anywhere. It's inborn in the hearts of men. It's not learned, it is derived from nature itself. And nature was a term that old people used for God. Thomas Jefferson said it, nature and nature's God. That's what they meant when they said nature, they meant God. And so this journey toward liberty for us was a very long journey. But once we began it with the Declaration of Independence, we made some discoveries. We hold these truths to be self-evident, right? Self-evident. And we hold them. We didn't learn them. They weren't in a book anywhere. These came to us through the natural course of violent struggle so that morality and liberty could be used to govern our people instead of the unbridled and unchecked power of the King of England, which is what he was doing at the time. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Notice it does not say that all men get equal stuff. Our Constitution was not meant to provide equal stuff for everybody. It was meant so that all men would have the equal opportunity to succeed or to fail on their own merit and to use their liberty to build a life for themselves and their family free from government intervention, free from government intrusion, free from the unchecked power that is government. So we hold these truths to be self-evident. They're there for anyone with eyes and ears to see, that all men are created equally, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Endowed, that was placed in you the moment of your creation. You have those rights because you were born a free and independent being. Now, because you have that liberty, can you exercise it? Yes, you can. But if you fail to exercise it, will you still have the liberty? No. Second Amendment rights, First Amendment rights. Here again, the First Amendment itself gives us the inalienable right to petition our government for redress of grievances. That's what we're doing in the state of Jefferson. I went to the Secretary of State's office to record one of those things, a declaration from Lake County. Secretary of State said, I don't want that. I said, you have to take it. I don't have to take that. I said, you do have to take it. Why do I have to take that? I said, because I have the inalienable right to petition my government for redress of grievances. That's why you have to take it. I better make a phone call. I'm serious. And so a couple of phone calls later and 15 or 20 minutes later, when the correct guy got back from lunch because everyone else was afraid to take it because they're government employees and they really don't know what their government has the ability to do and not do, and they don't have any idea what's in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, even the California Constitution. They truly don't know. And this isn't meanness, folks. This is ignorance. Now, ignorance is a situation you can rectify. If you're just plain stupid, you can't fix that. But if you're ignorant, you can fix that. You can make a choice to fix that. So we recorded with the Secretary of State. We went over to the Assembly Pro Tem, same thing. Same thing. In fact, the Senate Pro Tem said, I'm not taking that. I am not taking that. I said, you have to take it. No, I don't. Yes, you do. And we ended up at the Legislative Counsel's office, who apparently accepts proof of service when they're being sued, and they took it. So, because we are suing them, we're suing them for redress of our grievances. But that's our problem with liberty. The people who have the unchecked power to dictate your every move to you are not familiar with the rule book, not in the least way. Constitution of California. Let's go to the meeting of the minds first. Why do we have a Constitution in California? Who cares about that? Why are we not just citizens of the western United States that touches the ocean, south of Washington or something? Why do we need California? Why did we form a government in California? What do we care? Why did we form a United States government?
Equal footing.
Trade. That's right. Okay, we formed it for equal footing. In other words, we were a loose group of people in this country, and we realized very quickly that the British were not going to leave us alone. So we had to form some entity that was powerful enough through unity in order to stand between us and our enemies with a common voice, and with a voice that everyone supported. What did we have to do in order to do that? We had to delegate some powers. We had to loan the government on a temporary basis some of our liberty, didn't we? In other words, we had to give in order to get. And that's where morality enters the equation. Without morality, we wouldn't know how that worked. We wouldn't know what to give up. We wouldn't know what to expect back. We'd be mad because someone else got more than we did. So it was morality that allowed us to delegate those powers. And we delegated the powers to Congress and to the United States government in the three separate but equal branches so that each one of those branches of government would check one another. And no branch of government would rise to a station of power that was more than the other two or would create an oligarchy which would subject us to its rule. How did we do? We did pretty good for a while, but not lately, huh? Okay, so we formed a government for legitimate reasons and for moral reasons. And there were several founders of our Constitution that demanded morality be included in the equation. In fact, government will not work without morality. Because what is government without morality? It is simply unchecked power exerted anywhere it wishes, and you are powerless to stop it. John Adams, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to govern any other. He was one of the writers of the Constitution, right? Charles Carroll was a signer of the Constitution. Without morals, a republic cannot stand. Those are just two of them. Alex de Tocqueville, who wrote a book in 1830 called Democracy in America, and he was here. This was a great book because he was here. He saw what was going on. He saw what worked and what didn't work. He said the greatest form of government known to man is the township or the county because you can look your representative in the eye and you know what to do about him if he doesn't follow your wishes. You vote for somebody else next time and you get rid of him and you get your neighbors to think the same way. And you have that power provided you're involved. And you have no power if you're not involved. In fact, you abdicate your power to the next guy when you're not involved or when you don't know the rules. So Alex de Tocqueville said, this republic will stand until the very day that its legislature learns they can bribe the people with their own money. Well, I mean, King Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun, right? I mean, so this circle of history, not really true. History always repeats itself. The only open question is, do we keep making the same mistake when we go to deal with the same situation? The Roman government, with Marcus Cicero participating, knew that if you threw silver and bread from the top row of the Colosseum down to the masses while they were watching their lions eat Christians, that they'd have a little money, they'd have a little food and plenty of entertainment, and they wouldn't bother you about anything else. Does that sound familiar come Sunday and Monday night? I guess that's when the football games are on. I mean, is anybody really thinking about the water crisis or the fact that California BOR let 15,000 acre-feet go straight to the ocean in order to save 6 fish? Well, I mean, football's on, I don't really have time for that. So it doesn't affect me anyway because the people that are going without water are down more towards Stanislaus than they are here, right? Why should I care? Morality, that's why I should care. I should care because it's wrong. I should care because it's a violation of governmental process and procedure which my elected officials should be held accountable for. It doesn't matter whether I'm the one that didn't get the water or not. Because what is another moral judgment we have to make? To defend those who cannot defend themselves. Are you your brother's keeper? You better be. Because otherwise, when you're in trouble, your brother might look right on past you and say, hey, this doesn't have anything to do with me. And remember the government code. The government shows up after the crime was committed, attempts to investigate the crime and apprehend the perpetrator. Their job is not to prevent the crime to start with. Only morality can prevent that crime. Laws against murder never stopped one single murder. I'll bet you Jeffrey Dahmer never thought for a second, if I eat that guy, I'll be violating Penal Code Section 187A. It was simply Penal Code Section 187A that put Jeffrey in jail until somebody else lost their morality and killed him. But these things, I mean, we're laughing at this. I'm laughing with you, but it's true. That's how important morality is. So we're endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. And among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Property rights. That's what those are. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution of the United States are filled with property rights. Property means everything in constitutional republic. And Benjamin Franklin said, unless property is secure, liberty cannot exist. Why is that? John Locke said that. It was one of your natural, inalienable rights. Life, liberty, and property. Samuel Adams said, life, liberty, and property together with the means to defend those the best you could. In other words, Second Amendment rights, unless you favor a hammer or a stick. So, life, liberty, and property. Why is property so important? Because you have to be able to count on the things you own in order to take care of your family. If you can't count on those things, if you can't say to yourself that the property I worked so hard to purchase can be used to help me earn a living for my family, can be used as a refuge when I don't want government intrusion into my life, can be used to provide my children a start, can be used to borrow money to take care of me with medical bills when I get old. If you can't count on that property, what do you have? Do you know one of the greatest things that was destroyed in the financial crisis? Property rights. Millions of people lost their home. I'm not saying whether it was right that they lost them or not. I don't, if they didn't pay their payment, I don't know. But the point is, it devastated property ownership. I have relatives in Los Angeles, they don't care about property rights, they're never going to own property. I talk to kids on the plane all the time. I talked to this one young guy, we were coming back from Hong Kong on the plane, and sitting there with 16 hours to go, and we got to talking about Constitution and liberty, and he says, who cares about that? He said, I wake up in the morning, my BMW starts, I go down to Starbucks, it's open, I get my latte, I go to my relatively well-paying job, and every Friday my girlfriend and I go to the movies and have dinner. Who cares about Constitution? And anyway, make your deal now because the Chinese are going to own this country in 20 years. He wasn't a bad kid, ladies and gentlemen. He was dead serious. That was the background from which he spoke. Those were that was his moral compass. He did not know any better because we failed to teach him. We failed to teach him the importance of liberty. And he may not realize it. He may not realize what he's giving up when he laughs at liberty and property. But you have the right to life. That's your property. Your life is your property. What good is your life if anyone can take that life from you anytime they want to? Can you count on it? I mean, can you count on the police to stop them? You'd like to. They'd like to. They would like to stop people. They have a moral code, and they're very, very attentive to that moral code and code of conduct and standards of behavior, contrary to what the news says. But physically, police can't be everywhere all the time. They cannot protect your life. You have to be a willing participant in your own liberty. Property we already talked about. Liberty. Liberty is freedom with morality. Liberty is your ability to change course in midstream, to sell a piece of property you don't want to have and try to make a profit on it, to engage in business and take a capital risk, and for that risk be rewarded. To be able to say something to a government official without fear of reprisal. Do we have that? Do we even have that? In the government of the United States today, if you are a conservative organization, can you petition the government for a protected tax status and not be belittled for that or not be persecuted? Do you have liberty? Is that liberty? No, it's not. And remember, government has no morality. That's like an accounting decision. That's a business decision for government. We want to continue in a certain way. And if we're successful in persecuting this group, this group, this group, that guy, and that guy, we can continue doing things in a certain way. Look at environmental law now. Is the word fish contained in the United States Constitution anywhere? No. Does that mean that we should just say the heck with the fish? No. Why? Morality. There's that morality thing again, right? We owe it to the next generation to be responsible with our resources. That goes without saying. Now, there are people that are amoral. What do we do with those people? What do we do with people who cannot use their liberty wisely and infringe on the liberty of others and constantly make a mess that everyone else has to clean up? That's what the courts are for. You sue them, you put them in jail. Re-elect them. Or you re-elect them. Yeah, thank you. You're a big help. Well, I need 10 more like you right now. So we have a court system for that. Now, does the court have the power to overrule the Constitution of the United States? Why not? They're the court. Why can't they? The rules. because the rules say so. Article 3 of the United States Constitution says that the court has the authority over all matters of equity and justice under the Constitution, not over it. It has no power to change this document, none whatsoever. So why do they do it? Because they've been doing it since 1803 was the first time they did it. Even the Founding Fathers allowed them to do it. Because we weren't thinking, and we weren't attentive, and we weren't involved in the process of government enough to preserve the document that so many people shed blood for. In fact, so many people shed blood for this, they even made a reference to it in the pre-founding document, the Lee Resolution, the Declaration of Independence. They said that liberty was paid for with the lives, treasure, and sacred honor of your fathers. You didn't pay for it. It was a gift to you. It was a gift that these men gave you, and that every veteran in this room attempts to give. Now, I'm not making a comment on whether your war was just or unjust. They said after the fact mine wasn't. I didn't realize that when people were shooting at me. I just shot back. I wasn't thinking about the big picture. I was just doing what I was told. But the point is that liberty was a gift to you, but you also have a duty. What is that duty? Once again, it's in the rule book. It's in the rule book. Your duty is to secure liberty for future generations, for your children. That's your job. Someone else did the job of giving you the liberty. God gave you the morality. That was born in you. The inalienable rights were born in you. There's a gift. That was a gift. So your liberty was a gift. Your inalienable rights were a gift. The way you live was a gift from someone else. We've got a lot of free stuff going here. And we only have to do two things for that. In order to maintain the gift, we need eternal vigilance, right? What's the price of liberty? Eternal vigilance. And then our job is to secure liberty for the next generation. If we fail in that job, what's going to happen to them? Government unchecked, power unchecked, a life that you won't recognize and wouldn't like. We already have that. It's already starting because we've failed in our responsibility. Doesn't mean we have to continue to fail, though. We can stop this as soon as we decide to. It's within our power. Ben Franklin said, "I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see that God governs the affairs of men." That's your gift of liberty. That's your gift of inalienable right. But your job is to secure liberty for your children and your grandchildren. And I think I've said this before in this stage, but I'm going to repeat myself because it's important. I've been everywhere on earth. I participated in one war, and I've flown to 5 others in every socialist pest hole on the planet. Democratic People's Republic of Congo, Somalia, Central African Republic, Ethiopia, Somalia, Sudan, Bosnia twice for 2 different governments, Iraq, Iran. I mean, I don't know how many that adds up to, but it's a lot. And one thing I know, and I know this with sure certainty, and I have hauled, when we haul in the 747, we haul a lot of stuff to a place, and then because we have an upper deck that has passenger seats, typically the only cargo we haul out are caskets. Because each casket has to be accompanied by a young man, a soldier. It's usually one of the guy's buddies. He was usually there when the guy is killed. Most of the time, they're pretty beat up. In fact, we used to have a big bottle of pills so they could take pills and go to sleep. Dope. And we'd give it to them. But one thing I learned from that experience is that there is a very, very simple difference between tyranny and constitutional republic. In any form of constitutional republic, like we have here, and we have, by the way, the only constitutional republic on earth. There are parliamentary governments, there are democratic governments. We don't have those. We don't have democracy, do we? Democracy is mob rule, isn't it? You can legalize anything in democracy. Constitutional republic means the minority, the inalienable rights, never, ever, ever give way to the majority. There isn't one thing in this book that binds the people. Not one. Every rule in the rule book binds government from doing certain things. The minority never gives away their liberty, no matter what the majority would like to see or like to have. In constitutional republic, you wake up in the morning and you are secure in the knowledge that the laws apply to everyone equally, that what you owned yesterday, you still own today, and you have the ability to use that property to make a living for yourself and your family, and you may defend that property with deadly force if that's what you're called upon to do, because the police will not be there in time. That's constitutional republic. In any form of tyrannical government, and I have seen a few of them, you wake up in the morning and you ask yourself, what is the government going to do to me today? CARB, drive-by-the-mile tax, carbon pollution taxes, tax on your water, tax on everything you do, every breath you take, every mile you drive, everything you buy, every step you take. What kind of government do we live in now? And here's what we can do about it. Starting today, have this be the last place you ever go where you leave and you go have an ice cream and say, God, that was a good meeting. I really enjoy that guy yammering. I can't imagine enjoying anybody yammering unless I actually got to do something about it afterwards. This 20 minutes you could have been asleep somewhere. But here's what you can do with the knowledge. You can take that knowledge and you can use it. That's why we're trying to create the state of Jefferson. We are tired of living in a government that is unchecked power. We want to form a government where the rights of property are protected, where the rights of the individual mean something, and where we have adequate and close representation, because government works best, in my experience, where you can look your representation in the eye. That's what we want in the state of Jefferson. We want a government where every single county has equal representation in the Senate, just like the federal model of government guarantees the states. The states are guaranteed a federal model of government in Article 1, Sections 2 and 3. Why can't the states enjoy that same form of government? I know, because the Supreme Court said we couldn't. The Constitution doesn't say that, doesn't say anything about it. In fact, the Constitution in the 9th and 10th Amendment and in Article 1, Section 8 defines very clearly what the federal government can and cannot say to the states. So why did we need a state? Let's get back to that. Because we needed an entity to stand between us and an overreaching federal government. Now, what's the meeting of the minds to the state of California? Why did we form this state? What did the authors of our Constitution have in mind when they formed the state of California? I'll tell you what it is, and we have those documents too. We, the people of the state of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, that to secure and perpetuate it, we form this Constitution. Why do we have the state of California? To secure our liberty against an overreaching federal government. How corrupt has the state become where it serves that purpose not one lick? And our meeting of the minds is that that is the only reason we have this state. What do we do about that? Article 2, Section 1 of the California Constitution says that all just power is derived from the people, and that whenever government fails to serve the people, it is their right, not their permission, not their ability, not they might do it if they got mad enough. It is your right to alter or reform that government. To alter or reform that government. So that's what we're doing. We're forming a state where we have equal representation in the Senate for each and every county, just like the federal government has, and where no county will be rounded down to less than one assembly person. Each county will have adequate and close representation in both houses of our state government. With a part-time legislature, something we can afford to do, and a constitution that will protect property and protect the rights of the individual, and we do this correctly, and I'm asking you now to think for the next 100 generations. Quit thinking of yourselves. I mean, half of us have gray hair out here. We're not going to be here that long anyway. But we need to secure liberty for our children, and this is the way to do it. We need a constitution that is strong enough that it will protect the next 100 generations from usurping politicians who don't know the rules and don't care and simply want to exercise power for its own sake or their own enrichment. That's why we need the state of Jefferson. I will stay and answer as many questions as you like. Please, if you have not signed support statements, please sign before you go. Please help have this be the last day that you did nothing to secure liberty for your children. It has to be, or this won't work. And if we're not a moral people, this won't work. So thank you very much.